Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners public hearing on our 2022-23 budget. We're picking up again here after a short recess with a session on revenue to support the budget. This is a 1 hour projected time frame. It's 4:01 p.m. My name is Ty Menser, Chair of the Board. To my left is the Vice Chair, Commissioner Gary Edwards. To my right is Commissioner Carolina Mejia. To her right, County Manager Amira Chavez, Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell, and Clerk of the Board Amy Davis. The purpose of this ongoing public hearing yesterday and today is to accept and consider public comment on the proposed 22-23 budget. This session is regarding revenues to support the budget, including property tax levies. This is a hybrid public hearing. Those wishing to testify have joined in person, by Zoom, emailed in comment, or mailed in comment. If you wish to testify, please visit the Thurston County homepage and select Announcements of Public Hearings on the left-hand side. The information to join this public hearing remotely has been posted there. But if you do not wish to testify but would like to follow along, please watch the live stream through the Thurston County YouTube channel. Robin Campbell, Assistant County Manager, will provide information on this topic. And I will read names if there's more than one. We'll go through them. Zoom, you don't have to sign up in any particular way. You may just wait to be called on. Each citizen will have 4 minutes to testify and or ask questions. Or is that applicable to this session?
This is actually a hearing on the revenue for the county, and this is not the Q&A budget hearing.
No Q&A involved here. This is 4 minutes to testify about the presentation and the revenue pieces of the county budget. You have up to 4 minutes. You may not give time to any other speaker, and when called on, please state your name and area of the county in which you reside for the record. The hearing has been open and remains open, and I'll pass it to the Assistant County Manager.
Thank you, Commissioner. Robin Campbell, Assistant County Manager, here this afternoon to present the revenue and property taxes that support the county budget. I'm going to share my screen. And start the slideshow. This afternoon, I'm going to go through a whole lot of information. I'm going to go kind of fast to keep us within the time that you have allotted. I will pause in certain places for the board to ask questions, and then at the end, the board will ask for public comment. So the county budget process is governed by state law, as is most of what the county does. RCW 3640-070 requires a public hearing on the budget, and 3640-071 allows an alternative date in December. And that's why we hold the budget hearings on the first Monday in December. The board chooses the alternative schedule. 3640-080 requires the county's legislative authority to determine each item in the budget and adopt it by resolution. 3640-090 requires the Board of County Commissioners to fix the amount of the levy. And 8555 or 84, RCW 8455-120 requires a public hearing on the revenue sources that support the budget, including your consideration of increases in property tax revenues. Finally, RCW 8452-070 requires the county legislative authority to certify property taxes levied for county purposes by December 15th of each year. And this is new. Up until this year, our taxes had to be certified to the assessor no later than November 30th. So 2 of you may recall meetings in November just before Thanksgiving and rushed sessions right at the end of November to certify on time. In the last legislative session, a bill was passed that allows the county to certify for our taxes on December 15th. So that is why this year, for the first time, you're holding the revenue public hearing at the same time as the overall operating and capital budget hearings.
Okay.
So let's look at the revenue that supports the budget. Here's a table that you're becoming very familiar with. I've gone over it many times yesterday and today. So we're going to just go right into the breakdown of revenue. Total revenue for all funds in the operating budget is anticipated to be $473.6 million in 2022, $394.1 million in 2023. And you see that in the overall budget, 38% of your budget, of your revenue, your operating revenue, comes from taxes. And we're going to break that down because it is the biggest source. It's usually a little bit bigger part of the pie that comes from taxes. And the reason that it's only 38% this year is because intergovernmental revenue is 28%. That percentage is usually in the teens. And the reason this year it is so extremely high is all the money that we are receiving from the federal government and the state to pay for pandemic response. That is the #1 largest influx of intergovernmental revenue. We've also got some random things coming in from the state. For example, funding for Blake is a few $1,000,000 that we usually don't see. We're anticipating money from the new infrastructure bill. There are a lot of other sources that we've never seen before in intergovernmental payments. So that's a much larger piece of the pie than we've seen in a long time. Here are some examples of the revenue. Taxes, of course, property tax and sales tax. Those are the two big ones. There are also some special revenue taxes. Again, a sales tax, treatment sales tax. There's detention sales tax. There's many different smaller tax revenue sources. Your charges for services are where a citizen pays for and receives something almost over the counter. So garbage disposal fees are part of charges for services. Internal service or interfund payments, it's the accounting lingo. But internal service charges are also represented in charges for services, and those are all our internal service costs. Intergovernmental revenue are the payments that we receive from the federal and the state government, things like grants. Usually it's grants for roads or housing. This one's driven by pandemic response grants, but we also do state revenue sharing is part of intergovernmental revenues for like liquor. The county receives a portion of the liquor profits that the state collects. We receive marijuana revenue. It's just not a lot of money, but it is represented in this budget. Licenses and permits, fines and forfeits, these are fees. Generally, you pay a fee to get your marriage or vehicle licenses. You pay for construction permits, that's included in licenses and permits. If you get a speeding ticket, you pay a court fine. All of those types of fines are included in this section of revenue. And then miscellaneous revenue, the best example of that I have is investment interest. A lot of the miscellaneous things I see are like cash short and over in a cash drawer, or just, these are usually minor things, although as you'll see, there's one fund that puts a lot of money into miscellaneous. It can add up to a large amount. And then transfers are just when we move money from one fund to the other. For example, the roads has an operating fund and a capital fund. The main revenue stream goes into the operating fund. They transfer money into the capital fund, and then pay for the project out of the capital fund. So when you see a line item in your budget that has one fund's got an expenditure, and then that expenditure becomes the revenue in another fund, and then that fund has an expenditure too, that's a transfer, and it's represented according to state rules as revenue. So the big funds, I'm just going to walk quickly through what the big funds are, the top 10, if you will. The road fund is one of the biggest funds usually. The operating expenses are 32 million in 22 and 35 million in 23. Total operating revenue to support those expenditures, roughly 31 million in 22, 35 million in 23. We'll be using a little bit of fund balance. The bulk of the money comes from taxes, and the bulk of those taxes are the property tax for roads.
If we have questions, Chair.
Jump in.
Defer to Robin. Is that okay if we jump?
Yeah, please jump in.
Go ahead.
On page 5, on page 5, under proposed operating revenue, all funds, intergovernmental is showing at 28% there, but it's about, I don't know, 3 times what 2023 is going to be. Is that because of CARES money or ARP money?
It's the COVID money. It's American Recovery Plan Act, ARPA.
That's,
recovery
I
fund.
mean, that's quite a big chunk difference. So that's some of the commerce money and other things maybe that went to the health department and that kind of thing?
Yep, all that is
From
there
other
too.
involving that?
Yep.
And then on page 7, other financing sources, how come that jumps about $4 million, $3.5 million?
I don't have an answer off the top to that, but I can certainly get it for you.
And then, I mean, that, what it does is it affects that, the total operating revenue bottom line there of 35. So, okay, good. Okay, that's just.
And once again, it could be as simple as a transfer from the one fund to another.
Okay, got it.
But we'll get an answer on that.
Okay.
And I think budget staff are tracking and recording all your questions so we can get back to you. All right. Solid waste. The bulk of the solid waste revenue is charges for goods and services or tipping fees. We refer to them as tipping fees, and all a tipping fee is when you take your garbage to the waste and recovery center, you pay a fee to leave it there, and it becomes a lot of revenue for the county. Approximately $29 million is anticipated in tipping fees in the next year, each year for 2 years. And the bulk of that is not private households. The bulk of it is the commercial garbage companies.
Oh, really?
Yep, dollars.
The bulk of the dollars?
The bulk of that revenue is, yep.
Yeah, and then the same kind of question there on total operating expenditures. It, jumps up about 10 or 12 million. What's that about?
Yes, that is the plans that the board has for a new contract and then some projects that we're doing at the work.
And there'd be adequate funding on hand for that, or are there more? I don't see.
There is, you may recall in the budget, the presentations when we went through Public Works, they had the fund the fund balance worksheets for all of their funds, and the solid waste fund has a substantial fund balance. It is probably the richest fund in the county.
But we have, I don't know, programs in place that we're redoing something, buying a compressor or
Yep.
something.
So it's more than that. You may remember they were looking as to how we're going to revamp the satellite locations,
Yeah,
building scales. We're going to be looking at rebuilding some of the buildings at particularly the lab at the work. So all that is part of the plan that has been presented to the board. So, and what you see here, the jump in 2023, I believe that is the question that you have, from the operating revenue versus the operating expenses,
yes.
includes that, because as Robin has stated, we have a significant ending fund balance in the tip and fee, and we're going to start going through the process of utilizing the ending fund balance to actually build infrastructure.
Well, to me as a layman, that's clear as mud, but I'm sure I'll ask more about it later. Okay.
Great. All right. Medic One, also one of your largest funds, and I would just note, look at the drop, 29 million in solid waste, and then this one is $16 million. We've got a few mega funds, if you will, and then you've got funds that are in this 10 to $20 million range, but the vast majority of the roughly 80 funds that the county has are under $10 million. They're small. We have multiple small funds. So Medic One, the revenue is about 16 million, going up to 17 million in 23. The bulk of that is property tax. And again, this is a big jump if we were to compare it to 2021, given the levy lift that we'll take a look at later on in this presentation. And the operating expenditures are roughly the same amount as the revenue each year. Conservation Futures Fund, in the top 10, even though it's only 1.6 million in revenue each year. The very small amount of all other is interest earnings, but the bulk of Conservation Futures, actually all of its revenue is from property tax, approximately 1.6 million in each year. And the board has authorized spending of 2.5 million in 2022, 2.7 million in 2023. Again, this fund has a substantial fund balance that you are spending down. Public Health Fund, or Fund 1500, is used to support most of public health. This is where we're getting, one of the funds where we're getting a whole lot of the intergovernmental payments. The amounts of grants have gone up substantially. And as you can see, 21 million, almost 22 million in 2022 is going to be grants from federal and state sources. The bulk of the state grants are federal pass-through money. You see that start to go down in 2023. This fund is mainly funded by grants in most years, but the amount that we have in the upcoming biennium is substantial. The Housing and Community Renewal Fund is primarily used for housing, affordable housing, a homeless response, and the services that support housing. Again, intergovernmental revenue is abnormally high. This represents the money that is coming in both directly from HUD, the Housing and Urban
Development.
Thank you, Development Department of the federal government, and from CTED, or Department of Commerce, it's not CTED anymore, Department of Commerce of the state of Washington are both passing money through to the county to spend on housing. So a lot of housing money in 2022. Not as much is known at this time for 2023, but we're not done yet, and it would not be at all surprising if we see unanticipated grants next year.
And a good chunk of that's that ARP money that we put forward towards rent recovery and all that kind of stuff.
Right, it's right here.
Yeah, this is not recovery fund money, this is the state money coming in, that's their share of ARPA. So a lot of money pouring into housing. Treatment sales tax is another one of our major funds. The entire amount of revenue is from sales tax, as it says right in the title. This is a 0.1% sales tax, or a penny on every $10 you spend. 10 years ago, it was generating less than $4 million a year. And in 2022, we anticipate revenue of $8.6 million, going up to $9 million in 2023. It is a significant increase in the amount of sales tax in this fund. This fund has, again, built up a relatively substantial fund balance, and the expenditures of $10 million a year are intended to start to spend that fund balance down.
I guess I got a quick question on that is, for 2023, are they taking into consideration any kind of a slip or inflation or anything at all there? Because I think that's maybe not going to be that rosy.
So the sales tax assumptions in the general fund, treatment sales tax, and detention sales tax are all the same. We're anticipating 10% growth in 2022 and 5% growth in 2023, which is a conservative estimate. And we'll go through a sales tax projection in just a few minutes. This is your COVID fund, which has become the largest fund in the county, $56 million. That is a combination of the $28 million that we received this year. Very little of it has actually been spent, and plus the additional $28 million that the county will receive in the spring of 2022. We have just booked the entire amount. We won't spend more than we have, and as you're familiar, we'll do the fund balance calculation in the spring. We'll say how much we actually spent in 2021, and then the balance will be adjusted for 2022.
So the
But
commissioners
bulk
won't
of
have
the
to
money's-
kick in this $55 that we're going to spend over the,
I'm sorry, what?
said the commissioners won't have to come up with the $55 that we're going to spend more than the revenue?
Yeah.
Or the 18,000 the next year?
Yeah. I'm not quite sure where that amount came from, but we'll make sure that we don't spend more than what we get from.
But we've got until 2024 to spend that money, don't we?
We do, and so, you know, we've actually got until 2026, and that year might be extended by a bill that's currently moving through Congress. But we booked it all in 2022 because we don't have a clear plan, and we're just going to roll it forward until it's gone.
Okay.
Well, we have a draft plan.
Right.
Yeah, we've got a draft, but it doesn't have the
We haven't made
timing.
formal binding commitments.
Right, I think
Very few.
you have made a couple
Yeah.
decisions already to move forward, but not entirely, yeah.
Right. Early next year, we'll be bringing that back to you. So, storm and surface water utility fund. The bulk of this is booked in miscellaneous. which is where I think that it's odd that it's marked as miscellaneous, but that's the accounting code that they use. Most of the storm and surface water utility fund are, I believe, payments that are collected, that is a fee,
It says on the impervious surfaces of each
right?
property.
So not quite sure why it's booked in miscellaneous, but that's where it is, and it's the fee that we all pay. So 7 million anticipated in revenue, 8 million in expenditures, and again, there's a fund balance available for this purpose. Environmental Health Fund, the bulk of this is charges for goods and services. That makes up 3.6 of the $6 million in revenue. These are charges for things like when a food handler needs license, that's a license fee. But inspection fees, permits that are issued, all of the things that environmental health charges for, plus they receive some intergovernmental grants. So revenue, again, 6.1 million per year. Expenditures are set at 7 million per year. They are, again, spending down fund balance. Detention sales tax, roughly the same, not exactly the same amount, which is interesting, not exactly the same as treatment sales tax, even though this is also a 0.1% tax. It is not charged on all the same things. Some things are exempted. So the amount of revenue, even so, is still substantial. 8.6 million in 22, 9 million in 23. Expenditures are set at 9.7 million in 22, 9.8 million in 23. We reviewed this financial plan just a couple of weeks ago to demonstrate that there is capacity in this fund for the additional spending. To be able to cover costs. One of the things you do in this budget is shift costs out of the general fund into detention sales tax to create capacity in the general fund. There is capacity for that in this detention sales tax.
Hey, Robin. These operating expenditures may change tomorrow based on the conversation that we'll have with the board.
That's absolutely true.
So just to give you a heads up.
Yep, could go up.
Let me just ask you a quick one. The 1/10 to 1% sales tax is the same for treatment sales tax and for detention sales tax. How come one of them's $43 short?
The dollar amount is a little different, and
That's
and it's
nitpicking.
because you don't charge the same things. Certain things are exempt under one of them.
Okay,
It's a very strange.
okay.
Okay, the next one is your land use and permit fund. The bulk of that is licenses and permits that are issued and charges for goods and services, which are also related to filings in your permit center. The total operating revenue is anticipated to be just under $5.5 million in each year. Expenses are anticipated to be just a little over $5.5 million each year. This is using fund balance. This is one of the funds that I suggest we pay close attention to in the coming year. This is running the edge of where the fund balance ought to be. And I would also say that this is one of your more volatile funds because it is extremely sensitive to any changes in the market. And revenue can take a dive really fast in this fund. We recommend a 3-month fund balance, whereas in most other funds, we're recommending 2 months But this is a volatile fund, and it's one that we'll watch carefully in the coming year. And then there's general fund. General fund, the bulk of the revenue, as you can see, is taxes. 70% of the general fund is funded by taxes in the coming year. Taxes are anticipated to be $79.4 million in '22 and $82.2 million in '23. Charges for goods and services and intergovernmental revenues are also significant in the general fund, and then all other for a total anticipated revenue of $116,233,000 plus a few dollars in 2022, $117,407,000, $122.
I got a question about that.
Yes, sir.
That one graph out of the budget book, doesn't it say 132,000 is the, instead of 116, doesn't it? I don't have that book with me, that one.
Look at the summary fund.
Is that what you're looking for?
No, I'm
No,
looking
that's not
for
what
the,
he's looking for.
the one that shows from ending fund balance and then goes to beginning fund balance, and there's a jump of about, I don't know, 13 million, 16 million or something between 21 and 22 ending fund balance.
I'd have to
Goes up
look at
to- Beginning fund balance. Remember, that was the question I was asking you, Romero, and you said you had a different number or something coming up on it.
Are you talking about the ending fund balance for 2021?
Yes, and then it was, you know, about,
That's what he's asking.
that's the one I think I'm thinking about is, I wonder what I did with that.
Yeah, the point of my comment was the ending fund balance of 2021 changes throughout the whole year.
I thought you said you had a new number for that.
Yes, and the reason of that is I just received a number from Financial Services last Friday. That their projection at this point for the ending fund balance for 2021 is 38.1 million. And we need to reconcile what that number is. When you start making those financial decisions pre-preparation to the budget, the ending fund balance was less. As you may recall, that the whole spreadsheet was about 36 point,
close to 37
close to
million.
37 million.
The new projection from
So in-
Financial Services is $1 million more.
So it's 38.1 million, and that's from Financial Services projection. And that, is a little bit closer because we only have 2 more months, December and what we call the 13th month. So it's still evolving the ending fund balance because some of the assumptions that we made earlier in the year about the ending fund balance, it's just projections. And it's bound to change that as we move forward in terms of the expenditure. So Financial Services takes into account the specific rate of expenditures. And that's the number that I was alluding to yesterday. That's the number that I'd received verbally from Financial Services. The ending fund balance for 2021 at this point, they're
Is that
projecting.
the one you said Darren gave you?
Yeah, Financial Services.
Okay,
It's 38.1.
okay.
Whether that is the end result of 2021, don't know. Still a couple months to go through.
Okay,
Right. All right.
thank you.
So the numbers on this page reconcile to all the other graphs that you've seen in the last 2 days.
Okay.
All right, so that is the revenue that is anticipated to support these expenditures in the general fund.
Robin, quick question, clarification.
Sure.
Intergovernmental revenues and the general fund, that is not the ARPA funds.
No,
I'm going to clarify.
It's not a what?
ARPA
it's not the ARPA.
Oh, okay.
So we are
money.
not taking into account any ARPA funds as part of the revenue of the general fund.
Yeah, none.
So,
No, well, and let me clarify. In the budget, the board has approved the
Oh, the
lost revenue
less revenue.
to be deposited into the general fund. So we'll be transferring, I think it's like 2.4 million this year out of the ARPA fund into general fund. Next year, I've estimated 1.5 million of the money in lost revenue. That could be more, it could be less.
That's pursuant to a Department of Treasury formula.
Absolutely,
Yeah, we
yes,
utilize the Department of Treasury formula to come up with that loss of revenue.
right.
Thank you, Commissioner.
So, moving on, general fund expenditures. They are in total $125.8 million in 2022 and $124.2 million in 2023. And that is more than the revenue because we do have a substantial fund balance in the general fund right now. And when you look at the forecast, in probably about an hour, you'll see that, as the board well knows, you've planned your expenses to spend down the fund balance until you hit a kind of a plateauing, but you're spending on quite a few one-time items and getting things stabilized, if you will. So you've planned the spending down of the fund balance in the general fund. Still to a financially responsible level.
So it's about $10 million difference in expenditures over revenue, is that it?
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So let's break down the taxes. Property taxes in '22 anticipated to be $46 million. And then in '23, $47.4 million. Sales tax, 26, almost 27 million in '22, 28.3 million in '23, and then all other taxes, you receive a little money from the city of Olympia for a public safety tax. We receive a criminal justice sales tax from the state that's roughly $3 million. There are other miscellaneous small taxes that come in this category, but the bulk of the funding in the general fund is property tax and sales tax. They are the major drivers, and that's why I spend the bulk of my time talking to you about those two specific sources.
Is the property, on page 21 there, on that property tax, is that what we end up with basically? Is it like 99%? What do you're always talking about there's a percent missing or 2% missing?
We tend to collect somewhere in the 99% range. This year, we're going to collect almost 100% of what was budgeted for property tax, nearly 100%. And the treasurer talks to you about 99% being the traditional amount that's collected of the levy. So, and by design, and we're going to talk a lot more about property tax in a few slides.
Okay.
Real quick, on the all other, for property and sales, you've done a projection and you've done it by year. Mm-hmm. This one is not, this one is flat, and you said it's dependent on sales. Why wouldn't that be? I mean, if it's coming from Olympia's sales tax, for example, that's going to go up if ours goes up, probably.
It's less than $100,000. It's not, the variance, it's not 100,000 in growth. The total amount that we collect is less than $100,000. So any growth would be very small.
6.4 million, most of those sources are going to be flat?
Yes. They'll grow, and you can treat that as windfall. But in a conservative budget, they're very small amounts.
Okay.
So, trend in sales tax revenue. This is sales tax back to 2006. It follows a normal pattern on collections. It's the nominal amount that was collected every month. Actual dollars, you see that it was, running pretty flat, even when you hit the the Great Recession in 2010, still pretty flat, not quite as high as it was the year or two before. Stayed relatively flat. In 2012, Department of Revenue implemented a different payment system. That's why the pattern changed. They went from they converted to an online payment system where a lot of quarterly payers started paying monthly. So you saw the trend kind of change, but overall, still pretty flat until we hit early 2015 and the growth took off. And we've been on an upward trajectory ever since.
There is a dip in May 2020
There is a dip in May 2020.
as the pandemic.
So the actual amount collected is interesting, but what economists tend to look at is year-over-year change. And that's where this looks really interesting and starts to really tell a story. And again, this goes back to January 2006. You can see that we were cooking along, year-over-year growth in the 5 to 10% range in most months for each month. And then you hit the 2007 starts to soften, and then the recession hits. 2008, 2009, negative growth in sales tax every month for a long period of time. We start to recover a little in 2010, but you've got a lot of ups and downs. Those were really rough years where the amount of money coming in was pretty flat, but growth was negative. But we start to recover in 2013. It's still a little rocky, but you see from early 2013 through early 2020, this is what economists were saying is the longest expansion period in history for the US economy. And you see year-over-year growth in every month in the 5 to 10% range, and some months exceeding 10%. Then COVID comes. And every economist that we listened to was predicting a fiscal cliff. And we went off it. And you see that negative growth in May and June in this graph. But we anticipated that that would last a while, like it did in the Great Recession, and it didn't. It became a classic V-shaped economic recession, just boomed down and popped right back up. What nobody anticipated was the degree to which it would pop back up. It went up, not just a little, but a lot. And the month-over-month growth has been nearly 10% every month, and in some months exceeded that greatly. When now we knew in May and June that the year-over-year growth would be extreme because last year, that's when we saw that dip. But we really didn't anticipate all those months of more than 10%. So what this has resulted in cumulatively is year-to-date, year-over-year growth in Thurston County is 19.4%. And My projection that I've been working with in the forecast that I've been presenting to the board for the last 3 months now has predicted that we would end the year at 16% growth. So we're actually, with only 1 more month to go, doing better than I had forecasted in year-over-year growth. And if you look at the years all the way back to 1992, it's easy to see in this chart when there were recessions in the US. You see the dip in the mid-90s, you see the dip in the early 2000s, then we hit the Great Recession, and then this period of expansion. And all the economists that we've heard from over the last month, I think commissioners have seen a few of the economic presentations. The economists are saying it's going to continue to be a hot market as far as retail sales in the near term. They don't see it slowing down anytime soon. So this forecast includes 10% year-over-year growth in 2022, but then resumes a very conservative 5% growth, which is well below many years except for significant recession years. 5% is below what our usual growth rate is. So this is actually a conservative forecast for sales tax included in this budget. And I'm going to pause there for questions.
Why is 23 down so much there?
That's because it's predicting 5% growth. I've adjusted for the things that you bring up, Commissioner, inflation and the potential for things slowing down.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Then, property tax. Let's go through the levy. You've seen this graph before. Thurston County General Fund collects 9 cents on every dollar paid in property taxes. Now, we also keep some money for Medic 1, about 2.3 cents on the dollar. That could change because of the levy shift. We haven't calculated this graph yet. About 4 cents on the road fund, and then a fraction of a penny goes to conservation futures, a very small amount to conservation futures. But the bulk of the property taxes paid by citizens goes to the state. It's used for local schools, then cities and towns, fire districts, and all the other junior taxing jurisdictions after that.
Our voters set the conservation futures rate, or is that, there's a range, isn't there? Or is that set?
The conservation futures can work like any other property tax levy. It can be raised by the board by up to 1%, and then anything above that to the highest lawful levy is had to be a voter approved with a levy lid lift, just like in the general fund.
But what could voters do with that lift? They could,
I'm sorry, what?
what's the capacity for voters to choose more conservation futures?
I can get an answer to that.
I know we've talked about it in the past, I just couldn't remember. Go ahead.
Yep, I'd have to look, but there is capacity there. The way the levy is calculated is a little arcane, but this is the main pieces of the form that we fill out that's provided by the Department of Revenue. We take last year's highest lawful levy that excludes the amount of refunds, and you multiply that by 1%. That's the 1% that the board may increase the levy. So the value of that is $423,781. Then we take the value of new construction that's provided by the assessor, and you multiply that by last year's levy rate. So the value of new construction, 728.5 million roughly, and last year's levy rate was 1.11555 per thousand in property value. You do the math, you then can add $812,674 to the budget. Then the next thing that you can add, the revenue, you add it to the revenue, the levy, is the growth in the value of state-owned utilities. And that's provided by the state of Washington to the assessor, and then the assessor sends it out. The growth in value of the state assessed properties is 43.6 million. You multiply that by last year's levy rate, that allows us to add $48,656 to the levy. So our new highest lawful levy for 2022 is $43,663,171. To that we add refunds, and the amount of refunds is provided to us by the treasurer. So you add refunds, the refunds this year were $167,972. That gets us to the total regular general fund property tax levy. So there are a variety of reasons that the treasurer might issue a property tax refund to a citizen. And all of those amounts that are refunded are added up by the treasurer, but the county is entitled, the taxing districts are entitled to collect the levy. So the amount of refunds that this group of citizens didn't pay get added to the next year's levy and distributed out amongst all property taxpayers.
You know, I have to say, Commissioner, if you can figure out what you're doing, you are a miracle woman.
It's very complicated.
It's similar to what the board explores, the open space. In the open space, some of the property owners who apply for that is a property tax break. But that break is distributed among the taxing districts, so we still collect the same amount.
Right.
So
It doesn't impact.
It doesn't impact the what we can collect.
It impacts what that particular taxpayer pays in.
But I can see what your comment is counterintuitive, that you see a levy refund should be a negative, right? But it's what the treasurer pays as a refund this in 2020, we're allowed to collect that in 2021, yeah.
Right.
So let me just,
Targeted refunds get replenished by the general taxpayers.
Right.
That's right.
so if somebody gets some money back, everybody else pays
Everybody
one
pays
penny
for it.
more. or
Absolutely.
That's right.
Yep.
That's exactly right.
something. But it'll give you a headache trying to figure it out.
So the county tax rate then is going from $1.12 to 97 cents.
That's exactly right, because you get to the regular levy amount, then on this example, I've added the road levy shift, that's the next item in the worksheet, that gets us up to 46 million. That amount is divided by the total value of all property in the county of Thurston, which is
47 billion.
$47.3 billion is the total value of the property in Thurston County. You divide the 46 million levy by the 47 billion value to get to our tax rate per thousand of 97 plus a little higher cent.
Is there any other state in the union that does this?
I think we're unique. I really
Gee.
think that we're unique the way this is calculated. It's very complex.
And the 97 cents per 1,000, that's, to me, is the lowest that I have seen, and because of the property values has going up so much.
Might have been higher in, or lower. It could have been lower before the recession.
Before the recession, okay.
Yeah.
And really, and that goes back what capacity on the levy rate that we have, which our maximum is $1.80.
Right.
I remember back when, before I was on the commission, and I spoke to, I think, to both of you at a budget open house about, and it was the formulation of the courthouse ballot initiative, and there was a real concern about making sure that the proposal was modest enough that there would still be capacity for something else that might be done, because it was like 157, or, it was like up there, and, it was a proposal to bump it by a certain amount.
You recall absolutely correct, because when we were doing the financial model for, the potential levy lift of the new courthouse, we needed to make sure that we don't absorb all that capacity. And we needed to make sure that we are prepared to have the dips in the economy, recessions along the way for the next 20 years. That's what you're recalling, absolutely.
Yeah, you were trying to explain that to me, and I was only half getting it because I didn't understand all of this as well as I do now, but I understand.
I'm still only getting half of it. I've done it longer than you.
So that's how we calculate. This is the general fund. We do this exercise for all of the funds that are funded through property tax.
And the road levy sheet may change based on the discussions that we
That's
may have
exactly
tomorrow.
right. This assumed a $500,000 reduction in the road levy shift. You may choose to do less based on the conversations you have in the next 2 days. You may choose to do more. I mean, it's totally up to you. But I calculated this early calculation at 500,000. The levy resolution is the next really confusing thing, because
More so than this.
oh yes, yes, even more so, because the resolution, what the state law says is that the board has to adopt a resolution that states in both dollars and percentage the increase of the levy. So you'd think it'd be 1%. We always talk about 1%. It is not 1% that you see on the resolution. Here's how we get there. The increase in the levy is calculated by multiplying last year's highest lawful levy by 101%, and then you subtract last year's actual levy that included refunds. And remember, the highest lawful levy that we start with last year does not include refunds. So that's how you get to the $170,000. This is exclusive of new construction, utilities, levy shifts, any other thing. So to calculate this, what you'll see on your resolution is $170,000 and 0.3989% increase. Yes, Commissioner.
It's 0.4%.
I don't even know where to start on this. Where does that 101% come from?
That is the highest amount that you can raise the levy.
Actually, it's 1%.
Yeah, it's a 1%
It's the 1%.
increase, but if you multiply it by
multiply
101%,
it-
then it's a 1% above.
It's the 1%.
That was voter enacted through an initiative, wasn't it?
Well,
For
that
1%.
initiative was adopted by the voters of the state of Washington, but it was declared unconstitutional by the state Supreme Court. However, the legislature
did it.
passed that to put that cap in response to the voters' intent.
Right. will of the voters.
So it was a legislative action.
My next question is so I see how we got to 42, 801, 840, but how do we get to 42, 631? Where did that number come from?
That number is the amount of the actual levy that was collected last year prior to the levy shift. It excludes road fund diversion and road fund levy shift.
But I thought it was 42,378,000 that was last year's.
That is last year's highest lawful levy. That excludes the refunds.
Okay.
Highest lawful levy and the actual levy were different.
So, okay. So this one excludes.
Oh, God. Has there ever been an attempt to straighten this out so normal people could look at it and figure it out?
And then,
I don't know. It all came out of the legislature and Department of Revenue. I just learned how to do it and make sure I follow the rules. I also work very closely with the assessor.
The assessor.
I had training this year from the Department of Revenue expert because of the levy lift. We wanted to make sure we were doing the Medic 1 levy correctly.
The legislature
so
has a
it's all
task
reviewed.
force on tax structure, and I don't know if they're going to this kind of detail, but I would assume that if they're looking at other foundational components of Washington's taxes, we could down the road see a reform of this whole kind of,
Yes, that would be
complexity.
very welcome.
I don't know about that, because I wasn't able to go to that work session, but I don't know how deep they're going. I think they're staying very high level stuff, but. it would-
Look at all the numbers behind that one decimal point of 0.39. How does that even make sense to do that? I mean,
That is a conversation you would need to have with the Department of Revenue. I know when I attempted to round that number, I got the resolution back from the assessor telling me that it was inaccurate. I have to carry the decimal out. Yes. So this is what you'll see in the levy resolution that will be on your agenda next Tuesday for every one of the 4 levies that we do. So how does that actually play out? Here are 3 charts. The property values in Thurston County are going up. Because the property values are going up more than 1%, that 1% cap creates a downward pressure on the tax levy rate. And so what you see here is the graph of the rate is like a mirror image of the total values in the county. The rate, when values go up, the rate goes down. When values go down, the rate goes up. It's
makes perfect
just
sense.
a mathematical calculation. It really doesn't. But the county, the total levy goes up either way because you're raising it by 1% and you're adding the new construction every year.
I mean, the new construction's gonna count for, I would think, yeah, well, it can tell from the numbers, it's gonna account for twice as much, it looks
Twice
like.
as much as the 1%.
If the graph's going up, it's a third 1% and 2/3 new construction, based on the numbers from this year.
Right.
Okay.
And it's been growing lately, but we're seeing a plateau.
But if we go into a recession, that number won't
That
be.
number could.
Absolutely.
That number goes down. It dropped in 2010. It dropped from new construction values of over $1 billion, that's $1 billion with a B, to 300,000 over the course of 2 years. It just plummeted. And then it has taken this long to grow back up to this amount.
And as you may recall, the board had conversations as to why the increase on property taxes was more than the 1%. and it's because of the new construction.
Right.
And that influences a lot. So if you take the numbers, pure numbers, it's more than 1%. But the county is not raising the property taxes more than what the 1% is. It's the new construction what influences the bottom line.
And so in layman's terms, are people paying more or less?
Well, this table might help you grapple with that. This is just general fund. This is not your total property tax bill. You know, because we pay more as taxpayers than just the general fund.
Yes.
All those other
All
parts.
the other things,
Right.
I know play a piece of it, but
Right.
in terms
But
of the general fund,
just looking at the general fund levy rate and the average home value back to 2017. I took these average values off Redfin through 2021. If the home value, so the home value in 2017, the average home value was $280,000. Our levy rate in 2021 or 2017 was $1.26391 per $1,000 of assessed value. So this taxpayer paid $354 into the general fund that year. If their home value increased on the same as the average, then in 2018, it was worth $315,000. Our levy rate dropped a little, but their taxes were $40 higher, and their taxes were higher because of the value of their home was more. So our rate went down. If their home value had stayed the same, they would have paid less into the general fund, but their home value went up. So what you see is as home values go up, even though our rate goes down, their value is going up at a higher rate than our property tax rate is dropping, so they're paying more. And in 2022, I just made an assumption that home values would increase at the same year-over-year rate as they did from 2020 to 2021. And if that's the case, the homeowner of an average priced home will pay about $26 more into the general fund, even though our levy rate goes down. It's because the home value is going up.
But you're right, a regular property owner on their property tax statement is everything. Right, it's not just the property tax that comes to the general fund to the counties, schools, the state property tax, everything. So the cumulative effect of this formulation has a larger impact to the regular property owners.
So levies are calculated this way for county funds. General fund, Medic 1, although Medic 1's got a new twist, conservation futures, and I'm drawing a total blank. What's the fourth one? Well, we'll see it in a minute. It'll come back to me. So for these four funds, they're all calculated like this. City property taxes are calculated like this. Most of our junior taxing jurisdictions are calculated like this, 1% new construction refunds. School levies are different. School levies are voted, and they are generally voted in at a flat rate for your value. So as your home goes up, their rates don't change like this. And this is further adds to the confusion that the things that voters see on the ballot are constructed in a different way than the levy is constructed for general government.
I just did a hypothetical or just a math on 20, if you look at 2020 to 2021. So this homeowner's valuation went up 20.5%.
That's what happened this
The
year.
tax went up 7.4. So it's not nothing. It's not corresponding to the value. It's an intermediate amount
Right.
in that particular hypothetical, or I guess that's not that average homeowner from 2021, just to show how it plays out.
Right. So that's how levies are calculated. Knowing all that and everything that we've reviewed so far in the last hour, here are the general fund major revenue assumptions. The general fund levy has increased by roughly $2 million in '22 and is expected to go up another $3 million in '23. And the growth in new construction is driving the growth in the levies. You saw it. The new construction add is almost double, over double the 1%. The road levy shift is assumed in this presentation, in this revenue part of your budget, to decrease by $500,000 a year. You may still change that before you get to the final levy certification. Sales tax is currently at a 19.4% year-over-year growth. That's crazy high. The forecast assumed 16%, so we're collecting more this year than I had anticipated. So far, it may still drop year over year. In November, if you only look at November, was 8%, but we're still looking at a total year. Future growth, of course, is unknown. The future is always unknown, but is anticipated to continue to grow at a pretty strong rate in the near term. So we've assumed 10% growth in '22 and 5% in '23 for sales tax. We know that the state of Washington is going to provide about half the cost of the Blake decision. That's what's built into the budget so far. We anticipate that the state legislature will step up. We're very hopeful that they will step up and cover all of our costs for Blake. So if that happens, you will have an increase in revenue coming into the county to cover the costs of Blake. On the other hand, the Blake costs may be less than what was been projected by our offices and departments. That would also assist with balancing a little closer to the budget. And the American Rescue Plan Act, we've assumed lost revenue, as we stated earlier, of $1.5 million a year. It could be more, it could be less, but this is the assumption that's built in. Here's your general fund revenue again. That's how I got to those are the major drivers that get us to $116 million in 2022 and $117 in 2023. Don't forget that out of the general fund levy, we have a set aside for mental health of $1.2 million this year. And then for the Veterans Fund, the levy out of the general fund is $532,000 this year. Road fund levy, you've already seen. Medic One fund, that's a little different because the voters have approved a 35-cent levy. It's a very complicated calculation. I'm not going to go into it, where we do a long calculation for those voters who are the property owners who are exempt, because you exempted senior citizens and certain other parts of the population, but still close to $16 million a year, almost $17 million for Medic One. And then the Conservation Futures Fund, $1.6 million a year roughly is their revenue from property tax. The actions that you can consider, of course, are to increase by up to 1%. We've assumed that you will do the full 1%. in these budget and the forecasts. And then I will ask you to adopt the levies and certify them to the assessor next Tuesday. Yes.
So the budget forecast that we've been kind of working under is with the assumption that we will do the 1%. So if we weren't to do the 1%, then the numbers would completely look
It
way
would
different.
change. Yeah, that.
Would it change by about $500,000?
No. Well, if you did zero, 417,000 is the amount of the 1%. So
Okay.
anything less than 1% would cause that number to go down.
Yeah.
But then it compounds over.
Oh, yeah, over
Yeah, it's
time.
Over time, yeah.
There's an interesting complexity to that too, though. If you don't raise it by the full 1%, you can bank capacity. And so like if you did zero this year and you passed a resolution saying we are banking capacity, then next year you could do up to 2% because you've got 1% banked. Or whatever amount you don't raise it in this year, you could bank for a future year.
Has anybody ever done it?
Yeah, that's,
I think other jurisdictions have done that. I've never done that. This county has done the full 1% every year since before I was here. So I can't give you a whole lot of details on how that, like, I don't know, is it banked forever? I don't know how long that lasts, but if you'd like, I could look into that.
But the 1% doesn't even come close to the inflationary factors. It's just of doing business.
If you think about the amount that we had to add to the general fund for just COLA, your cost of living increase, the levy increase doesn't begin to cover the COLA.
Right.
On the current contracts.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it too.
Future contracts
half.
is
Really about
future
6.
contracts are different
You were
story.
talking about.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, are we ready to move along?
Got a headache yet?
That was a lot. Okay.
What'd you find out about the 6 o'clock or 6:15?
6 o'clock.
Yeah.
It is 6.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm sure Mr. Pettit has some.
Pettit, you're up. Sure you have something to say on this one.
Good evening, Commissioners. Yes, I have something to say on this. I actually wrote an email to you guys earlier in the year. I talked about the idea of a levy lid lift. The problem the county has, and we don't agree on a lot of things, but I will agree with Ms. Campbell about the fact that we have a very regressive system. It is actually designed that it causes difficulties and problems because it only allows the increase of property tax by a certain rate and percentage. And then, of course, we turn around and we have to depend upon building and flow in the economy. I'm never about a lot of big taxes, but I will tell you this, is that this kind of brings an interesting point up because one of the things I don't agree with the Assistant County Manager is that if you read the RCWs, and I'm just saying what it reads, the levy shift is to happen and be able to move the levy rate from $1.80 up to potentially $2.47 and reduce the amount that's the levy amount can be for the roads. We haven't been doing that. We've been shifting the money without ever exceeding that $1.80 requirement. Now, we need money. I know that. And I know right now you guys want to think you got yourself a balanced budget. Well, anytime you're taking money out of one source, the road levy, and you're moving it into another spot in order to support the general expenses, you don't have a balanced budget. It doesn't exist. And you're not even remotely close to being able to do that. And that's partly because of the regressive tax laws. I am going to point blank state, I do not want to create conflict, but anything less than the $500,000 amount of reduction, I probably would choose to seek a challenge of whether or not you get any shift or not, because you don't exceed the $1.80 level of amount you can raise your levy up. It doesn't say raise your level up in dollars. And you might want to check with legal counsel on that particular issue. I realize I have limited time, even though I'm alone. One of the things I was taking note on is, like, for instance, on page 85 of the budget here, we show a revenue of $21,660,000 in property tax for the roads department. Now, if you really took a look, the roads department didn't get $21,660. The roads department got, by your own resolution, $19,859. So I'm making an assumption, and I'm sure you can ask the assistant county, are the figures in here that you have set for your levy amount that you're going out here, is that also inclusive of the amount that you're actually taking away with a shift? Because the numbers don't match. This is the resolution that you set for certification for taxes. This is the amount of money that you have in your budget. You're showing your budget papers for what the taxes were for property tax. They don't match. I'm just going to encourage you. There's a lot of things that you hear and a lot of things that you don't understand. And I'm sorry, it's going to take a long time for you to get all of this. It isn't what you do. So you do have to be dependent upon people to give you information. Not all the time do we see eye to eye on what that information really reads, but you might go ahead and check into that RCW about the requirement to exceed the $1.80 in order to do a shift, okay? I can email you that RCW in there. It doesn't provide for any shift below $1.80. And your levy rate is now projected at 97 cents or something. It's ridiculous. I mean, I really feel sorry for trying to put a budget together with levy rates. You need to consider getting a voter-approved levy lid lift in order to stay in the proper range for what you should do for the services we want. Thank you very much.
Okay, there's nobody on the Zoom.
Nobody on the Zoom, and we have a public hearing on the overall budget at 6 o'clock.
Okay, we're in recess till 6 p.m. Thank you.